Welcome to Childcare Conversations with Kate and Carrie.
So you are hiring new staff, and if you've listened to our podcast the last few months or you've seen us at a conference, one of the things that we're going to encourage you to do is to find people who haven't been in childcare. So finding folks who have been in the hospitality industry or even in the retail industry. And as a director, you need to know who needs pre-service training and what does that look like? So
Okay,
Carrie,
well, let's just presume that the person, that the person listening to us today hasn't heard those episodes. So let's go back and talk about that just a little bit, which is why are we saying don't just hire people who've already worked in the industry?
I know the answer to that question.
Okay, but it's not just, so I want people to know, it's not that we don't love people who've already worked in the industry. That's not the issue. There's a couple other reasons. So, Kate, what's one of your reasons?
So, first of all, if somebody is available currently and they have early child care experience, there might be a reason why they are not currently employed. So,
well, they could have just moved into the area, Kate. You don't have to, presume the worst.
But if you're in a community where everybody seems to know each other, you do have to presume the worst because there's a reason. Either they didn't mesh probably with either their staff, their parents, or their management. So that is one reason why we encourage folks to look outside of the industry for hiring people. Right. And Carrie, you have a great way that you do this when you're eating out. And
yeah, I mean, when I'm eating out, I keep an eye out for people who the kids' eyes track as they walk by, or that every time they walk by a table with a kid, they stop and talk to the child at the table. I want to just circle back. We haven't finished all the reasons why we want new people, new blood. Another big one is the demographic reason that a lot of people in caregiving fields left those fields in 2020, 21, and 22. So we've got a lot of people who left the field earlier in this decade. And so we don't have as large a pool of people who already have years and years of experience. So part of it is that we need to build up the inventory, so to speak, of people who have some experience in early childcare. And the third reason, and Kate's favorite reason, is because you don't have to retrain them into your educational philosophy and out of the educational philosophy of their last program. Because if they come in from retail or food service, hospitality in general, they probably don't have a very fixed educational philosophy, and you can mold them into your educational philosophy and your school culture.
Both of those are great examples. And if you understand that whether you're looking at retail or hospitality, as far as where they're coming from, you have unique selling points, such as no nights and weekends, an actual schedule, so they have a little more reliability from an
predictability
for both income and work schedule. So these are some of our reasons. Even talking to one of our guests last week, he had a similar situation, and the fact that sometimes it's really hard when hiring folks from within the childcare industry who have that background, who don't want to do things the way they did them at their other place. Again, nothing wrong with that, but what we want to talk to you about today is pre-service, and there's seems to be all kinds of different versions of pre-service, Carrie. I hear 8 hours. I hear 24 hours. I'm confused.
I've heard 8 hours, 16 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours. Yes, all of that can be confusing. So it's going to depend on where you are. So in Texas, so that's the one we're going to talk about here, but it applies no matter where you are, because there should be an element of pre-service, even if it's not required by your licensing. So 8 hours, they should have a basic foundation of how childcare works before they go into a classroom and are responsible for children. So they should do 8 hours worth of training before they are counted in ratio. We offer an 8-hour pre-service training class. You can buy it from us. You don't have to, but we have one available that covers what we think is a really good basis of this is what people should have before they go into the classroom. It could be one that you develop yourself that goes along with your orientation, where you're talking about where the Band-Aids are and you're talking about where to park and where not to park and introducing them to members of the staff. But they need to have about a day's worth of learning before they're counted in ratios so that they know what to expect if they've never worked in early childhood. If they don't know to expect that kids are going to act a little crazy their first couple of days in a classroom, then when that happens, they're going to bolt out the door and you're going to have people leaving in their first week at your school. You've got to give them a baseline of knowledge before they get in there.
Okay, so is this something, do we have to pay them for this?
Yeah. Again, I'm talking United States law. So if you're in another country, I can't guarantee that that's the law. But regardless of whether it's the law or not, it's best practice to pay people for their onboarding time because you're asking them to do this. You want them to feel like you value their time. Because if you don't value their time, they're going to go somewhere that does value their time.
Okay, so what's the difference between an 8-hour pre-service and a 24-hour pre-service?
So this is based on what do we need in our first 3 months. So before they go in the classroom, they need to know kids are going to, have problems. We need to know the basics of child development, starts at the top of the body, goes to the bottom, etc. So in that first 8 hours, we're giving them level 1. And then the idea is over the first 90 days, you're taking them from level 1 to at least level 2 and maybe level 3 of their understanding of their job and what responsibilities, opportunities there are in this industry. So we want to be broadening their horizon a little bit. So maybe start teaching them some of the language of childcare. So your reflective practice, right? That's a childcare phrase that people who come in from working at Target aren't going to know about reflective practice. So we talk about reflective practice or developmentally appropriate activities. Who knows what that is when they first come into our industry? So part of what we're doing in the next 90 days is that we're helping them to learn the language and deepen their knowledge. Because we tried to get them, I guess it's like the pre-service, the 8-hour pre-service is like kindergarten level, right? So we're trying to get them to at least be able to write their name, right? By the end of kindergarten, we want to be able to, write your name. So that's what the pre-service is. And the next section of pre-service, so getting you up to 24 hours total in that first 90 days, is how about if they can read and write? That would be lovely. And that they know that 2 + 2 = 4. So that's part of what we're doing in the rest of pre-service. And it can be, we're going to do 1 day here and 1 day here and 1 day here, or it can be, we're doing that 1 day before they start in the classroom. And then we're doing 4 hours the first 2 weeks and 4 hours the next 2 weeks and 4 hours and 4 hours. So you can break it up however it makes sense to you, but we want to get them to a point where they speak the language of early childhood so that when they go to a conference later, they understand what people are talking about. We're just trying to give them some fluency.
Well, if I'm a director and I use courses like the ones we've created, do I just have them sit in front of a computer the whole time? Or how do I implement this? I'm a little confused.
You've got a variety of options. I mean, best practice would be, again, to do it in short bursts of time. After we do that kindergarten level, right? Before they're in the classroom level, they're going to do that. And they can do that by sitting down and doing 8 hours at one time, reading a book or going through an online training like the one that we have available, or some other version, right? Maybe they're spending the whole day with you. But when it comes to the other part of the pre-service, the 90 days part, best practice would be to do a little bit, for them to do a little bit and then come and talk to you or talk to their supervisor about what they learned about child development. Did you know there's this thing called object permanence? What is that about? And so they can talk through that with their supervisor, have some reflection, and then go on to the next section. So that would be the best practice.
So I have another suggestion if somebody's listening and they're not sure how to implement the pre-service. So when you start looking at orientations, pre-service, even classroom observation, hopefully you have an actual plan. If not, put one together. So this is an opportunity for you to become your own HR director. So when they come their first day, and I would love to see people have the first day be either a Wednesday or a Thursday. And just know that you're not putting them in the classroom those first 3 days. And so the first day might be half a day on the orientation. So where to put your stuff, how to sign in, employee handbook, all of those kinds of components. And, if you're doing that kind of an orientation and you think you do it more than once or twice a year because of turnover, it might be worth literally videotaping yourself doing parts of that orientation. And then in the afternoon, have them just observe in 1 or 2 classrooms, see how lunch is done, see how naps are done. Maybe during naps, take an opportunity to pair them with another staff person to learn a cleaning protocol for maybe the bathroom. And then also in the afternoon, start the pre-service class. And then the day 2, which would be a Thursday, in the morning, they come in and they finish the pre-service class. And then in the afternoon, they're doing an observation of what might be their most likely course or class. So they can get to learn names, they can see how things operate. And if they're coming in at like 9 o'clock, they're going to get a chance to see probably different staff, because most schools don't have their lead teachers the whole day. So they'll get an opportunity to see opening staff and closing staff. And then on the day 3 is that same kind of observation, but you actually give them a clipboard with a checklist and have them actually see if they can find things. And if this is somebody who's never worked in the industry, they're going to probably see things that they may have questions about. And this is an opportunity for them to do that in the morning. And then in the afternoon, either work with a lead teacher if available, or with a director or an assistant director to kind of go over the questions. Then they have the weekend to recoup and recover. And so that Monday they can come in and either shadow in classrooms or begin to be an assistant in a classroom. So,
okay, well, now that sounds like an ideal situation. We know a lot of people are not dealing with an ideal situation when they're hiring, because the person that they just hired 3 weeks ago left at lunch and didn't come back. And they need to get somebody in ASAP, because otherwise the director or assistant director is covering that class.
Well, so here's something to think about with this. At least this is my feedback, having done this a few times. If you have this problem where people aren't sticking, maybe you need to reevaluate how you're doing your orientation and pre-service.
Absolutely.
So if you're only doing an 8-hour pre-service and a 30-minute orientation and everybody keeps leaving, then maybe you need to think about maybe Kate's 3-day best practice is something to consider if you really want them to stick. Otherwise, just start doing interviews all the time.
Yep. And that's kind of what I wanted to get at, is that if you're in a crisis mode because people just leave you can't figure out why, then I think we need to go back to your pre-service and your onboarding process, because I have everything labeled on the website as the 8-hour pre-service and the 16-hour pre-service or the 24-hour pre-service. But really, it's the onboarding process is part of what we're looking at here, is like, what do you need to learn in order to be successful at this job? What we create is sort of a spine for you to add on to, right? If somebody's just walking around and all they are is a spine, they're not walking around. You need some legs, you need some arms, you might need a brain, right? So you need to add the additional parts on for your school. What is the essential information? Who are the people they need to meet? And you need to make yourself a process or a checklist so that you're spending 90 days helping that new staff person become comfortable with working at your school. Because if they're not comfortable, then they're not going to stay. And if they're not comfortable, they're not going to be successful, even if they do stay, and you're going to end up having to fire them. So this is, I know it sounds like, yeah, sure, I'm going to have 3 days before I can put them in the classroom. Yeah, right, Carrie and Kate. But I'm telling you, this will take you out of crisis mode. It sounds counterintuitive. You're in crisis mode. So take 3 days where you have to hire a substitute from a substitute service. But I just hired this person. They meet the criteria. Why can't I just put them in the classroom now? Because if you put them in the classroom without doing the onboarding, you're going to have this same problem again.
Absolutely.
And you're not setting them up for success.
All right. So that's our goal for you, is to set yourself up for success. If you decide that you've got some additional questions based off of what we've talked about, feel free to email us, kate@texasdirector.org or carrie@texasdirector.org, and let us help you create your best practice onboarding process and what we can do to help you eliminate the duplication. Every time you hire somebody, it's costing you $3,500. And that is your time and energy and the school's time and energy in running those ads, doing the interviews, doing the orientation and training. So let's figure out how to save you money by taking 3 days as part of a real planned out 90-day process.
Okay. If you need help, go to our website. You can buy the 8-hour, the 16-hour, the 24-hour, and that'll give you a place to start. You need to go through it before you have your staff go through it so that you know how to answer the questions that they ask. Okay. So that's another thing I think is really important when we're talking about any kind of training. Before you have your staff do it, other than going to a conference, because we don't know what's going to happen at each session. But if you're purchasing training courses for your staff, I need you to go through it first so that when they ask questions, you know the answer. Okay?
Absolutely. Well, look for links to get to those courses in our show notes. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And Carrie, what would you like to tell them to do next?
Please share the show with friends. And also, I'd love it if you would go in and comment, write what you like about this episode on your favorite podcasting app, or send us an email with a topic that you'd like to have us cover in an upcoming episode. Okay, talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to Childcare Conversations with Kate and Carrie. Want to learn more? Check out our website at texasdirector.org. And if you've learned anything today, leave us a comment below and share the show.